All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're looking at the Apostle Paul's final, urgent words to a community that was really in crisis. And this isn't just some friendly sign-off to a letter. No, this is a passionate, last-ditch plea, all packed into the 6th chapter of his letter to the Galatians. And honestly, it deals with a problem that is just as real today as it was 2,000 years ago.
So let's frame our whole conversation around this one big question. What does real strength actually look like in a community? Because Paul's letter, it pulls back the curtain on this deep division among the Galatian followers. They were a group wrestling with two completely different answers to that question. One path was all about performance and pride, and the other, well, it was about grace and humility.
Okay, so you got to picture this. The Galatian community was literally being torn apart from the inside. There was this group, some people call them legalists, and they were insisting that to be a true follower, you had to strictly follow all these old religious laws. And what that did was create this toxic atmosphere of pride and competition and just harsh judgment. It was a million miles away from the freedom Paul had taught them about in the first place.
Now, here's where Paul does something kind of brilliant. You'd think he'd come out swinging, right? Just blasting the legalists, but he doesn't. His first concern is for the victims of this whole mess, the people who have messed up or fallen into sin. He's immediately focused on how the community is treating its most vulnerable members.
And get this, Paul uses a very specific Greek word here, katartizo. This wasn't just some vague spiritual fluff. This was a hands-on, practical word. It was the medical term doctors used for setting a broken bone. It's what fishermen did when they were mending their torn nets. So the goal isn't to punish or to condemn. It's to gently, carefully put things back in working order.
And this just perfectly captures the heart of his message. Paul says you have to do this work of restoration with gentleness. And why? Because the person doing the helping has to remember their own weakness, their own potential to mess up. So the big takeaway here is that real spiritual strength, it isn't about being the toughest or the loudest. It's found in gentleness and knowing yourself.
All right, so let's talk about that first path, the one that's causing all the trouble, the path of performance. This was the whole playbook for the legalists. Their entire focus was on what things looked like on the outside, on making a good showing in the flesh, as Paul puts it. It was all about getting pats on the back and feeling important.
And Paul just calls this mindset what it is. He says this kind of pride, it's literally a form of self-deception. When you're running around thinking you're something, you're actually blind to reality. And that attitude makes it completely impossible to genuinely help anyone else because at the end of the day, it's all about you.
So if that's the wrong way, what's the right way? Well, Paul lays out this totally different path, the path of grace. It's the complete opposite of the path of performance. It's a way of life that's built on humility, not pride. It's about service, not self-promotion. It's about focusing on what other people need.
And here it is, the central command of that path. Paul basically says you really want a law to follow? Here it is. Bear one another's burdens. Instead of piling more rules and more weight on other people, you should be lifting their burdens up. This simple, practical act of loving service, that's what he calls the law of Christ.
Now, to really drive home the consequences of these two different ways of living, Paul pulls out an analogy that everyone, and I mean everyone, would get. It's a timeless principle from farming that just perfectly explains the spiritual reality of our choices, the law of the harvest.
He lays it out so plainly. Do not be deceived. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. This is a universal law. You can't cheat it, you can't fool it. It applies to how we invest our time, our energy, our money, our attitudes. What you plant is what you get, period.
So let's break that down. What are the two kinds of seeds you can plant? While sowing to the flesh just means investing in that self-centered life of pride and performance. And the harvest, it's corruption. It all just decays and falls apart. But sowing to the Spirit means investing in that life of grace and service and humility. And the harvest from that is everlasting life. Okay, we're getting to the end of the letter now, and this is where Paul really turns up the heat. He makes it intensely personal. He actually takes the pen himself from his scribe, writing in these big, bold letters for emphasis, and he just lays out this stark contrast between his own motivation and the shallow motives of the legalists.
I mean, just stop and think about this for a second. This statement is absolutely radical. The legalists, they wanted the glory to boast in their religious rule-keeping. And Paul says the only thing he will ever boast in is the cross, an instrument of public torture, shame, and execution. He's choosing to find his entire worth and identity in something the world saw as the ultimate symbol of failure.
And this is where the contrast just gets razor sharp. The legalists were pressuring the Galatians to get this physical mark, circumcision, as a badge of honor, a sign of their religious achievement. And Paul's response is basically, oh, you want to talk about marks? I've got marks, but they're not the ones you're thinking of.
So what were these marks? They weren't some mystical invisible symbols. No. He was talking about the literal, physical scars on his body, from being beaten and stoned and shipwrecked and imprisoned for his faith. See, in the ancient world, a master would brand a slave with a hot iron to show ownership. Paul is saying, you want to see my credentials? Look at my scars. They are the brands that prove I belong to Jesus.
And really, that brings us right to the heart of it all. The fight in Galatia was a battle of boasts. The legalists boasted in external marks designed to impress other people. Paul boasted in his scars, the proof of his service and his suffering. So the question Paul's letter leaves hanging in the air for us is a powerful one. What does your life boast in? Is it the things you achieve to look good, or is it the scars you've earned for what you truly believe?